All right, so now that you have your pictures in Lightroom, we're going to talk about another option for you, and that's the Add option. So we're still in the import idea. You don't have to bring it back up, but I want to walk you through this because you may have images that already exist on an external hard drive, your computer's internal hard drive, but Lightroom doesn't know they exist. And you want to work on them now in Lightroom, so how do you get Lightroom to recognize that they exist? We need to add them to our Lightroom catalog. So you will notice, like I said, there was copy, which is what we did before, move and add. So two kinds of copies, move and add. We want to add these into our catalog. And before I go into this real quick, somebody brought this up and I knew it, I just forgot to mention it. So I'm going to step back a second. When you were importing from your memory card, you will sometimes be asked, do you want to erase on eject or not? Is that the way that's what you're talking about, right? Yeah, and it'll ask you that. You can go in and make a selection. It probably is in preferences. I never want to erase it when I'm done. I keep those images on there. I want to make sure they actually transferred to where I wanted them to go and they're there successfully. And then it's better for your card to not erase it in your computer, but to put it back in your camera and do a reformat on that card. So if it asks you at some point, do you want to erase when it ejects, you say no, and then you will erase it later on your camera when you're ready to get rid of it. The other thing that will happen is if you've inserted your card, and we'll suppose you had two different, say you were on vacation and you went and you had, I'm trying to get an example here. So you went somewhere and you had some pictures of a mountain. Maybe you were in the Rockies and you had pictures of some nice landscape scenes of the Rocky Mountains, and you stopped downtown and you had some downtown shots and you wanted to put those in two different folders as you imported them. You can do that. So you would say, well, I'm going to do the first ones come to mind are the city ones, the ones in town. You took some in town, whatever you were doing, and you made a folder and you imported 50 pictures from downtown into that folder, and then the computer, when it was done importing those, would have ejected it from the computers. It's still in there, but the computer ejected it. So in order for you to be able to now download the ones of the mountain landscape, you need to pull the card out physically and reinsert it. So if you're thinking, I can't get it to read the rest of those images, what happened to them? Are they gone? Did they disappear? Why can't I get Lightroom to find them? I didn't import them yet. That's all you got to do is pull it out, the card out, and reinsert it. And then, because if you had that don't import suspected duplicates, it should only show you, say, the mountain landscapes. Does that make sense? That's not in the notes besides me telling you about it, but that is something that can throw you for a loop if you don't realize you just have to pull out the card and put it back in, reinsert it. All right, so now back to the add. So this is used when you already have the files uploaded to your computer. That's why I wanted you to have new images never on your computer before, because I wanted you to copy them. If you already have these files on your computer's hard drive somewhere or your external hard drive, and if you were to select copy, it will make a duplicate of it and set it right next to the original, so you'll have 2 1s, 2 2s, 2 3s, and so on. So we don't want a copy of it. We just want to tell Lightroom that it exists and to put it in the Lightroom catalog. So you do Add. And when you click Add, you will have only 2 options over in this right-hand panel, where before we had 4. So with Add, you only have 2 options. Well, you don't have a destination option because it already exists somewhere. It's already being stored somewhere. It knows where it's being stored. You're going to find it over here. So it's going to put it right, it's going to acknowledge where it's being stored today. So what you can do is figure out what kind of previews you want to build. So that's in the file handling. And then you can apply something during import. Again, we're not talking about that today. We'll come back to that. So what you would do is you get into your system. And in my case, for my example, I knew I had some pictures that were in my computer's drive, so I located them. I know where I store my pictures when they're on my computer's hard drive. I found them. So you need to be aware of where you store your images and find where you store them. And I found them, and mine was these two images were stored in a folder called Colors of, and again, I have don't import suspected duplicates, so only the two images that had never gone through Lightroom showed up. I also have new pictures clicked right there, so it's only the newest ones, only the ones that Lightroom doesn't know about are showing in the viewfinder. I'm going to select both of those by check marks. I filled in this the way I want it. I want standard, I want to build previews, and it's ready to click import, and it will bring them in. So if you have 5 years worth of images, you've got 2 weeks approximately to get them all in Lightroom if you want them in there. So anyway, so any of your existing Lightroom or your existing folders of images you can bring in by following this very simple method of adding them in. So Lightroom calls it a catalog. So it's like, you know, we might call it a file folder drawer, but it's a catalog in Lightroom. And you can have multiple catalogs, but they don't suggest you do that anymore. So we're going to all operate off of one catalog, and we're going to keep it that way because you're not advanced enough to know about multiples. And I have almost 100,000 images in my one catalog, and things are going fine. So you just need one. If you want to change their location, you don't do it with Add. You do that with Move. So what Add is doing is just telling them where they are stored today. If you want to store them somewhere else, then we'll cover that in a few weeks. So this is only if you want to leave them stored where they are and tell Lightroom where they are. All right, so we need to move through this really fast. I may actually skip because I really want you to know how to use the develop part, not just work on the interface. But this should be a screen that you should be able to see now that you've imported. If you have a grid view that looks more like this, that's fine. That's still part of library. So we are in the library module. You can tell because it's highlighted at the top of the screen right here. And we are only going to talk about library and develop modules in these 4 lessons that we have. If you want to see a single image on the screen and you're seeing a bunch of images in grid view, there's 2 ways to go about doing it, 2 easy ways. One is down here in the corner. If you hit the far left one, it looks grid view. You can check it out. It's down there. The next one over, is, in this case, is highlighted because it's a single loop view, and that's what's showing here. So you can flip back and forth between those, which will flip you back and forth between grid view and loop view. If you see this thing, this is a blow up of a little arrow that's in the center of each one of these sides. This will open up and close the panels on each side. This is a panel right here. That's one panel. If it's showing, your panel's open. I leave that one open all the time. If you're not seeing this, there's a little arrow right in the center. Go up there and click on it, and it will come down. If everybody sees it, then I would just leave it open all the time, but if it really bothers you because you want more real estate for your main image, then you can shut it at any time. So this is, again, grid view. There's a keyboard shortcut besides using these little things. Keyboard shortcut, to get to grid, you hit G. No matter where you are, if you hit G, you will go to this view. If you want to get back to that single view and you're in this view, you hit the letter E. It doesn't have to be a capital letter E. I know I have a capital up there. You just hit the key. You don't use the shift at all. So it's G or E. We'll go back and forth between them. Or you can use the icons in the bottom right left-hand corner. So 2 ways to get back and forth. They're really fast, really easy. To find your images, how do you find them? Now, if those are the only things that you have in your Lightroom catalog, it's probably right there in front of you and open so you can see those images. But if you don't know how to find them for the future, let's look at the left-hand panel of the library module. So if everything is closed up, it looks like this. If you wanted to find the pictures that you just imported and they're not showing, you would go and click on this little arrow next to the word folders, and it will open folders. Now, I have a ton of drives on mine. You may have 1 or 2. You'll have your computers for one, and then you might have an external drive, or maybe if you've been using Lightroom for a while, you have mini drives. I have a lot of drives. These all register because at some point in time I've had them plugged in and used them, and they may be defunct now and I haven't erased them. But most of them actually have images on them, so I actually do. Well, I have 100,000 images. I need to get a new backup system or a new storage system. So I'm sorry you can't read this one. When I took that shot, I didn't realize it was there, but it says Macintosh HD drive right there. But I want to find the pictures that I was just talking about in my example, so I knew that it existed on my Jackie 2 drive. You can look here, it's a little green line right there. That means my drive is connected and it's live, and it's also highlighted. It just shows that I had my external hard drive plugged in at the time. I'm going to go down, and sure enough, there's Carter's name, and there's that first days folder, and I've even made a second folder, and it's called Newborn Shoot. So I can see both of them if I wanted to get into those pictures that I showed on that import screen a while ago. Those were first days. I would click on there, and depending on what I had used the last time I was in Lightroom, it will remember, it will open. So if I click on first days, it will open those pictures into this screen. Now obviously this isn't a newborn shoot or a baby, but it would put it in here, and this is in loop view. And if I wanted to see the whole gamut of them, like this grid view, I would just hit the G key and it would go, oops, sorry guys, and it would go to the grid view. This is the just the loop view though, so you can go back to that. So anyway, that's where you will locate your folders, your images, whenever you import them through Lightroom. This is where all of the information will be found. You find your drive, then you locate the file where they were, whether it's by name or by dates.
That last column, how many pictures you have in that folder?
This one, 16,363 pictures on this external hard drive, and the first days has 11 images in it. Newborn Shoot has 281, yeah, and so all together in his folder there's 334, and then this number will grow every time I add a new folder or more into those 2 folders, yes. All right, so let's look at the Develop module. So that was the library module, and that's where you view your images so that you know what you've got and what you want to work with, so you'll find them there. But we want to take them into the Develop module. How do we get them there? So that's what we're going to cover here. So I wanted to show you, I'll do that in just a second. What I wanted to show you with this one is this is the way I work. When I'm working on my screen, I want this picture in my Develop module to be as big as I can possibly have it. I don't want this panel open over here because I rarely use it. It's got these 5 things in there. There's presets, snapshots, histories, collections. I rarely use those things, and we'll talk about those on another week. So I don't need that open. I want to clear that away so this picture is larger. Go the right direction, I'll be great. All right, so we have the picture open, and now on the right, this for me always stays open. I may close the histogram every now and then if I don't want to use it anymore on that particular, I've used it, now I want to put it away so that I can see the rest of it. I would close that up by just using this little button here, but it's open, and we're going to talk about it here in just a minute. So we're in library again, and this is, you're looking at your pictures in the grid view, and you're looking and say, I want to work on this one. So you've decided what picture you want to work on, and you'll see it's highlighted. It's lighter than the other 9 pictures that are there. It's highlighted because I clicked on it. Now in this situation, you can click anywhere in the box. Sometimes you have to click right on the image itself, and sometimes it gives you the leeway to click anywhere inside the box. But sometimes you have to stay inside the image area. This one you don't. Like earlier we were talking, I said to do that select, you had to be on the image. So there are situations where you have to be careful about where you put your cursor. In this case, just select it, and then you need to get it over into the develop module. How do you do it? It's very easy. Just hit the letter D for develop, and it'll pull it right over into the develop module. If you don't do that, all you got to do is come up here and click on the word develop, and it'll also take it right into the develop module. And there it is, big and full. And so we're going to start talking about the information on the right-hand panel now. In the histogram, that shows you the basic idea of your image in color and how it lays out. But what I want you to see now is up in the right-hand corner, in the upper left-hand corner, there are 2 little triangles. The right-hand one is white, and the one on the left hand is gray, surrounded by black. These are showing the clipping areas of your picture. On the right, it's when highlights are clipping. On the left, it shows the shadows or the black clipping. So you can come up and you can click on it. If you click on, in this case, the white, the highlight clipping indicator, you can see in this image, I got red up here. That's what it does. It shows your clipped areas of your image in the highlights. These are blown out up here at this point in time. So unless I can bring back those highlights, I've lost all detail. That's what clipping means. So if you have something that is clipping, it means you've lost the detail in the highlights. If it's the white one, if it's the black one, you've lost your details in the shadows. And you need to pull up your shadows if you want to see highlights in it. Whites or the highlights are not as forgiving as the darks. Yes?
Jackie, how did you clear off the left side?
Those, yeah, I did miss, I jumped right past that. Those little arrows that are on the side, let me bop back here a second. Oh, it was way back here. Those, see those little arrows? They're on the middle of each side. If you aren't seeing your panel and you bring your cursor over to one of those little arrows that are very faint in the middle and you hover, it should open. If it doesn't, click on it. It'll open. If it stays open and you don't want it to, then you click on it again and it'll go back. Usually when you hover, if it's closed and you hover over it, it will open as long as your cursor is over it, and then as you move away, it will close away. And because I didn't want that one on the left open, I just don't hover over it. If I were to bring my cursor over there to the left, it will open up. I can get into it. As long as I'm into it, it'll stay open, and then I can move away. Or if you want it to stay open, you click it again. So there's like 3 clicks. One is closed, one is open, and the closed one, if you hover on it, it'll open and close. Does that make sense?
If you right-click on it, you get choices of how it works.
Yes, you can customize how those work. So if you right-click on that little arrow, a little pop-up will open, and you have some options there to physically keep it the way it wants to be. You can also use the 2 in conjunction. There's an option there, so you can get it to open, close. When one opens, the other one closes, and such things as that. Also, if you want to get rid of all panels, and they're all open, you want to close them all the way, or they're all closed, you want to open them all up, you hit the tab button, it'll open them all, tab button, closes them all. You can try that. Did it work for you? Any questions on that? All right, so, okay, back to the clipping. So I was saying you've got more lenience on the shadows clipping than the highlights. You don't want highlights clipping if at all possible. If you're clipping the sun, sun's pretty bright. So a lot of times street lights, sun, stars, those will be clipping. There's no information there, but there's none to get. So you're fine if that's the only thing that's clipping. Otherwise, you probably want to try to minimize that and not have any clipping besides those situations. There may be another one I can't think of. A light bulb maybe, you know, it may clip. Darks you can get by with having more clipping. So sometimes you want it for contrast or something, you might want it darker. Night skies will clip sometimes. That means it's all black. So it depends if you want it black or if you don't. The next one I'm going to show you that was circled. Here's a little bit closer view of that, so you can see the clipping triangles. Then you'll see here's the camera's information when it shot the image. Then the next line I want you to look at, and we'll start with this little lightning. You can see it bigger here in case it's hard to see from the back. That little lightning bolt means somewhere down the road you may see it. If you're just bringing them into Lightroom now, you're bringing them on the current process version, so you probably won't see that. If you import it today and you get an update or 2 or 3 down the road, and you may see that that little lightning bolt happens in there when you go back to do some more editing. It just means this was imported on an older version than what is currently available, and if you want to update it, all you have to do is hit that little lightning bolt and it'll put it in the current version of Lightroom. You can work on it either way. You don't have to change it. You can. It may make a change, a visual change. It may not. I believe I don't know if you can go backwards. If you click it, I don't know if you can say, oh, I want to go back to where. I'm not sure. I would have to look that up. What is this showing? Okay, so in my case, I had made a smart preview when I imported this image. And right now, my hard drive that this is stored on is also plugged into my computer. This line will change. If I unplugged my hard drive from my computer, that original part will disappear and it would just say Smart Preview. If you didn't make a Smart Preview, so suppose I imported this image in and I didn't make a Smart Preview for it, I didn't check that box, and my hard drive was connected, it would say Original on it. If I didn't have my external hard drive on and I didn't make a Smart Preview, it would say Photo Missing. Don't get scared. It's not gone. It's not lost. It's not deleted. It's just, if you see that, it should make you think, oh, I've got to plug in my hard drive. And then it will find it. It can't find it. Where it's stored is not connected, so it cannot find this image to work on. And you didn't make a Smart Preview, so it can't work on it until you find it. And a lot of times, and it will say up here something about it can't find the file. So, and it all just means plug in your hard drive. We are going to talk about this one icon only here coming up. I just wanted to show you it's listed right under here. These are for another night, but this one is a crop, and we will talk about that hopefully before we leave here. What you need to do is you need to assess the picture. So you look at it and you figure out where you want that picture to go. What needs to happen to it, what you need to achieve the vision that you want. Now, this is my workflow. You can choose to do it or not to do it, but this is my reason behind it. What I would do is this is what's showing up in your grid view. Actually, this is the only one that would show, first off, because this is the original, and it would have all the originals there. And I think I'm going to edit this, but I want to still see what my original looks like when I glance at my grid view. So I think I want to make a virtual copy of it. So I can keep the original look so I can see it, and I can make any number of virtual copies that I want. And I could do any number of different versions. So if, say, I had 3 virtual copies made, I could make one that was super saturated. I could make one that was black and white. I could make one that was somewhat desaturated. I could make one that looked normal, you know, just looked like it looked. And so you can make a number of virtual copies, and they will all sit next to each other. And the way you can tell if it's a virtual copy is it has this little turn back corner. If it doesn't have a turn back corner, it's the original. If it's got a turn back corner, it's a virtual copy. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just telling you that okay, this is where I started, and this is the edit I did on this particular one, and if you had another virtual copy sitting to the right of it, it would say, oh, and then you did another edit on it, and it's this one. If you notice, the name is the same on both of them, identical, so that there's no telling any difference up here. The only way is that little corner. And I don't let that confuse you. It's not like you got two pictures. It's just storing information on the edit. That's that XMP thing. But it's all stored in one file, no matter how many virtual copies you have.
The original there has a number 2 at the top left-hand corner.
Yep, that tells you.
Is the original going to be a number 1 or what?
There won't. If there's only the original, it's just there. It won't be a number there. So it starts with 2, and if you had 10 virtual copies and an original, it would have an 11 there. So it's just designated. It's just telling you that, okay, this 141, there's 2 of them. Okay. All right. So let's look at now we're going to start editing here. So the first line is treatment. You have the option of color or black and white. My personal workflow is I don't change it yet. I suppose if you know that you want it black and white, you absolutely don't want anything else, then you could do it. But I tend to fully edit it in color, and then I'll make a virtual copy, and then I turn it black and white, and then make any adjustments if I want to. So for me, I don't do this first, even though it's at the top of the list. But you can choose to do it or choose not to. Whatever works for you, you will find that out as you use Lightroom, and you can make that decision at that point. The next one is profile. And the way it actually comes in is this panel. This one has been doctored a little bit. So this is the way it comes in, and it comes in as Adobe Color now. And you will see it, and it'll look a certain way with the profile of Adobe Color. If you click on the word or these double arrows, you will get a drop down or a fly out, whatever you want to call it. You'll get a little window. Now this is off of a Fuji camera, and these differ from manufacturers. These menus can be different. This is Fuji. Now Fuji and Nikon are really similar in looks, where they have Adobe Color, Landscape, Portrait, Standard, and Vivid. I believe Nikon also, unless they've just recently changed it, always used to have a Adobe Neutral in there too. I've never once used that. Yep, Kathy?
I don't have the,
Are you a JPEG?
probably.
This is for RAW, and I'll come back to JPEGs in a second. So this is only, these preset profiles are only options for RAW images. So if you're shooting RAW, you'll have these kind of image options.
I'm talking about the profile and
This.
landscape thing. I don't have that on my panel here. I don't either.
She put the drop-down arrow,
Over here, I don't have it. Do I have the right?
It must be because it's a JPEG. They must have taken that out. Huh.
I don't have
It used to be on there.
Do
Are
I
you
have the-
doing a JPEG too? No, you've got it there.
Yeah, she's got it.
Who else doesn't have it? Is that a JPEG image? Okay. So evidently, you can't really do much with profile if you're shooting a JPEG, or you never have been able to. So this version evidently has totally gotten rid of it for JPEGs. It used to be you could do auto, and that was about it. So you're just stuck with what your camera did as a JPEG. If you were shooting a RAW, then you would have these. And I was going to come back to that, but I didn't realize it was totally gone now.
These are the same options you have in your camera too, right?
Yes. So if this was a Canon camera, these options might look different. I think there used to be one called Faithful, Adobe Faithful, and something. So if you're shooting Canon, you may say, well, it doesn't look quite the same, and that's why. So they do match your camera. And then over here, you'll see these 4 boxes. So if you click on those 4 boxes, it'll open up a panel that looks like this. Again, this is just for RAW now, if you're shooting RAW. And it gives you some options. If you hit one of these arrows so that goes down, like in this case, I clicked on the artistic arrow, it opens up this panel, and it shows you some different profiles that they've now made. These are kind of new to Lightroom. And you can hover over them and you can see it happening to the big image if I had a full screen of that. And it will change. And you can click on one of those and choose it now, or you can come back and choose it later. It doesn't matter. But there's some neat little artistic, creative things in there, and there's some pretty black and whites. So, you know, instead of just clicking black and white, you can go into the black and white options. There's 17 options. You can hover and see if you like, as you hover over each one of those 17, you'll see the big image change, and you can decide if you like one or the other. I always select my profile first, whether usually it's just this one for me, but you could get into this first if you choose. Usually I stick with one of these original options and then come in and change it later, but I'll start at this point. Because if you don't choose this in the order that it's in, you'll end up having to redo some of these sliders. Because it'll change contrast, intensity, saturation, things like that. And if you've bumped up the saturation already and then you click on it, it may be wild and you say, oh, I got to go in and redo. So if you just start with the profile, it used to be buried way deep inside of Lightroom and you had to go down to a different panel, and I'd always do it first thinking, why do they have it on the 5th or 6th panel, whatever it was? And so now they've got smart. They put it right at the front.
If you do that, can you reverse it?
Yeah. Nothing is locked in. And you can go back and take them all off. Yep. You can redo every time. It's non-destructive. Lightroom is non-destructive, so you can always go back. As long as it's just, you know, these virtual copies and stuff. Okay, so now the next section is white balance. And I think this is one of the harder ones to get right, and it all depends on what you're seeing and what color you want it to be. But if you click on As Shot, again, this is for raw shooters. If it's JPEG, you will only have the option of auto. And I think it might say custom. Am I correct on that? You can tell I don't shoot. Yeah, okay. So JPEG shooters will see auto and custom. You can try auto, see if it works. So can the raw people. You can try it, see if it works. Sometimes it looks good. Sometimes it looks atrocious. Sometimes it gets you closer, but it's not quite right. So then you can go in and tweak by sliding these sliders, either warmer or cooler, greener or magenta. So you can click and do one of these presets. And if you like it, great. If you don't, you can tweak the presets slightly with these sliders. That's one option. Another option is this eyedropper. And I find that it's pretty sketchy to get it to do what you want it to do, but you can click on it. It will then put the eyedropper on your cursor. You move the cursor to someplace on your main image, and you click on it, and it will read the color that's under that eyedropper, and it will try to correct the white balance according to that. If you want it to look natural, you need to click on either white, black, or gray. And like that image that I was showing you, there's no white in it, there's no black in it, and there's no gray. So if I were to click on the grass, it's going to say, oh, there's way too much green in here, so it's going to try to bring it back to neutral. If you clicked on the wood tones, it's going to try to cool it down because it's a really warm color. I find that, you know, it needs the white, the black, and the gray, and it can't be a brown black. It can't be a, you know, a real blue black. It has to be, you know, like snow is white. So you don't click in the shadows. You click on the sunny part if it's not blown out, and you can get, so it's a little wishy-washy, but if you get it close, then you can tweak it by moving the sliders to correct it to the way you want, or you can simply just move sliders until the color looks accurate.
Where it says 4,900 on the temperature?
Yeah.
I click on that and just put in the amount.
Yes, you can. Those numbers, if you click directly on them, you can just say you wanted that to read 6,000, yeah, 5,000. You can click on it and type in the number if you want, because it'll highlight it and you can type in the number you want. And if you wanted to go here, you know, you can go the same way. You could go -9, you could type in whatever number, if you knew what it needed to be. The thing is, you know, will that work? That's always the question. But if, you know, so sliders might be easier to view, might not, but yes, you can do that. The next section is the tone section. I can't see my next slide. So, okay. So it used to be this didn't work great, but now you might give it a whirl because it's pretty good anymore. So you can click tone, or auto, excuse me, and see what you get. And if it looks good, hey, you're there. If it needs a little tweaking, you still have ability to move any of these sliders any way that you want. So if you said, it got a little dark, well, then just bring up the exposure maybe. If the shadows were still a little dark, well, then raise the shadows. You'll notice on these sliders, for the most part, the dark side is the left, the light side is the right. So if you want it darker, you slide it towards the dark end. If you want it lighter, you slide it towards the right end. Again, you can click on these numbers and you can feed in a number if you want to. Contrast gets lighter this way, darker this way. So it's kind of the opposite. We're going to talk about black points and white points, but that's all connected to that clipping again. We'll talk about those in a different week. Presence down here, clarity, that's kind of a cool slider, but you can get carried away pretty quickly. It works great on landscapes, and it works terrible on portraits. So what it's doing, it's finding edges of contrast, and it's not really sharpening, but it does something with the edges. Dehaze is another type of contrast. So we have contrast here, we have contrast here, and then there's contrast in a tone curve that we'll do on another night. You can slide these, and they do treat it in two different ways. It's two different kind of algorithms working, and you can test it. If you slide this to the left of 0, it gets lighter. It gets foggy looking. So if you want to add fog to the whole picture. And I mean, but these are all global adjustments. So whatever you do to any of these sliders, it does it to the entire picture. So if you wanted to make the whole picture foggy, then you can slide it to the left. If you wanted to make it dehaze, exactly what it says, you slide it to the right. So maybe you've got a mountain scene and there's a lot of haze because it was a summer day. That might help. It also has a tendency to make things blue. So you may have to pull back you may have to warm it up a little bit, mess with that kind of thing. Vibrance works on midtones. Saturation of, it's not saturation, it's vibrance of midtones. Saturation is rarely used for me. If you use it, it's kind of like this automatically went on. When I clicked auto, it bumped up the vibrance 12 and it brought the saturation down. But saturation will make your reds, oranges, and yellows go neon. I mean, just out of control. So be aware that it does that. Vibrance does not play favorites like that. So if you need to use it, a lot of times I'll go to vibrance instead of saturation.
I don't have dehaze. Is that because I'm...
Try that auto button up here. If it works, great. If it looks good, keep it. Maybe you need to tweak it. So that's when you can move those sliders around. Or if you want to undo it, you can maybe, if you haven't done anything to it, it's just a Command or Control Z to undo it. The other thing is, if you want to, sometimes it's faster just to double click on the word tone and it'll reset them all to 0. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just in that section, just in the tone section. I just wanted to show you, these are all panels that are in the Develop module. And when they're all closed up, you can see them all stacked. And I just wanted to show you, by circling these, there are these switches on the left side of every one of these panels except for Basic. Basic has not got a switch to turn it on and off. But these are all on-off switch, like a light switch. So if the light gray is in the upward position, then that panel is on. If you want to see what it looks like without some of these different panels turned on, you just click on it and it will put that light gray section to the bottom, which means it's off. You can see how it looked before. click it back on, and it will be back on again. And so you can decide if you've taken your edit too far and you need to go in and adjust it, or if it looks great, or if you need to move farther. So I just want you to know those are on-off switches, and they're on everything at basic. And if you wanted to turn off the entire editing process that you've done, all you have to do is hit the / key. And you can do before and after, before and after. So let's look at one of these panels, and this is the detail panel. And in the detail panel, this is where you do sharpening. And we are going to have to finish off later. We won't get all the way through cropping, and I'm sorry, but we'll try to get through sharpening here. This is a default. So when it comes in, it's defaulted at 40 sharpening, and these radius and masking 0. Luminance is a noise reduction. It's at 0 as a default. But the color noise reduction is at 25. This is default. So if you don't want it, whether it's today or somewhere in the future, you think, I'm supposed to do this without any advanced sharpening, and I've just run it through Lightroom, just know that it's putting sharpening on it. So all you have to do is come back and pull that to 0 if sometime you want no sharpening done to your image. Just know that it's there. All right, so let's look at some of this other stuff. There's a little...
So you're saying like the sharpening amount with 40, it's just going to come up that way?
Yeah.
So if I see those numbers...
I think on a JPEG that's probably 0. This is raw again.
Yeah.
Yes, Michael.
So that's sharpen that without me touching it?
Yes.
Sharpen it to 40?
Every one of them will come in sharpened like that. And if you want to control it, then you'll just want to come in here and make adjustments, knowing that it did that. I wouldn't be surprised if there's not a preference that you could go in and change that. I haven't ever looked for that, but yes, you just need to know that it does it as a default. If you don't want it sharpened at all, you got to come and reduce it, take it off. Up here, so we've opened our panel using that little arrow. It's pointing down next to the word detail. There's another little arrow. That is keeping this segment with this little thumbnail showing open. I keep mine open because I use it. What this little is showing, this little thumbnail is showing 100% zoom. And that's where you can register the best whether you are getting the sharpening that you want, is by at 100%. That's the recommended. There is that light switch again. So this picture, it just picks a spot. I'm not sure how it picks its spot, but if you want to pick the spot that you see, because this spot isn't doing anything for me, there's this little box in the upper left-hand corner, and if you click on it, it will highlight it, and it will go with you with your cursor, and you can pick a spot on your image, and you say, I want to know how sharp the writing is on that particular area. You can click on the writing. You want to know how sharp the eyes are on somebody's pictures. Then you would click on that little box, bring your cursor over to their eyes, and check it out. That eye or whatever you clicked on will show up in here. And then as you move the slider, you can see how it's affecting that portion of the picture. This amount, 40, really isn't very high. So I would think you would need to bump this up. Now it's going to vary depending on how many pixels are in your image, how far you've cropped it. So look at it. That's why it's good to have this open so you can check it out. Generally speaking, probably 100 or below is what you're going to use. This luminance, if you happen to do noise reduction, because this is real noisy, you want to pull up your luminance. You can turn this off and on so you can see what color noise is, and it's obvious. And if you need to bump if you're seeing colored speckles in there, you maybe need to bump that up beyond 25. Go sparingly, a little at a time. You want to do minimal amount of noise reduction possible and still get it out, but you don't want to go, it'll start softening it. So noise reduction, if you go up to 20 plus this number should be 100 or less. So if you're going to use 20 on noise reduction, make sure this is 80 or less. It's kind of just a good guideline. So you can see here it shows that these are the defaults. Now let's look at this line under sharpening, and it says masking. This is a cool little button, and it was at 0. By default, it comes in at 0, which means that nothing is being masked on your entire image, not just the square, but the entire image. When it's at 0, nothing is being masked away. So this little saying, if you've never heard it before, is something you need to remember. You probably have heard it. Black conceals, white reveals. So if you hold down the Alt key and click on that little button, if it was at 0, your entire screen where your picture was will turn white, as long as you're holding it down. You hold down the Alt key, click and hold on the masking button. When it's at 0, you will see 100% white where that picture was. As you keep those held down and you slide this slider to the right, you will see black start to creep into your picture. What that means is wherever it's turning black is getting no sharpening. Whatever's white is being sharpened, whatever's black is not. So a good example would be on a face picture. You want to sharpen the edges of the eye, but you don't want to sharpen the baby's face. So you want to get those nice eyelashes sharpened, but you don't want to have the skin pores or the acne or whatever show. So you would click on the Alt key, click on this little arrow, pull it to the right until you saw the skin go black, the skin area go black, and the details around the eye and stuff are still white. And that would be a great place to leave it. And different images will require different amounts. You know, maybe a landscape, you might have a lot of it sharpened. Or maybe you don't want to have the sky sharpened, because why would you sharpen a crystal blue sky? It'll just put noise in it. So those are some things to think about, and this is a very cool tool. We have got to go. I would check this if you're bringing some in, just that you'll want to do chromatic aberration. We will pick up from this point next time, and we'll talk about cropping. That's the only 2 things we missed, and I'm sorry we didn't get through it, but I'm glad you had questions, and I'm glad we were able to work through those. So in the next class, we will, like I said, finish off. You'll learn about how to do cropping. Go ahead and try it. It won't permanently crop it, so you can test that out if you want. And we will talk about some more panels within the develop, along with more things in import and more things in the library menu.